So first things first, you should have gotten a little box that looks something like this, little Tupperware thing. The smaller one should have some of the smaller sized kind of beads and bubbles in it. And then the larger bit should have some of those bigger beads and those clear acrylic discs. And there should also be a few little kind of half bubbles in there as well to use. I peeled the paper off of most of those for you, but you'll notice there's a few in there that still have the paper on them. If you want to use those, I'll show you a trick later to get that brown paper off of them, because I know it can be kind of like tricky to get your nails under it. So, but there should be plenty of discs in there for you to be able to make at least 6 or 7 strands with a variety of little disc things on there, as well as the beads. So the first step in the process is going to be taking the fishing line, and we'll be adding the beads to it first. The glue needs about a 24-hour set time, so getting that part done first will ensure that once the glue's dry, then you're just ready to hang it on your stick and be done. And then also once the discs are glued on, you can't put any beads on the string in between them. So that's kind of why we have it that way first. So like it says, I believe everybody should have 7 strands in the larger strand pack, and then I added 1 extra strand for you to kind of use as a hanger for your stick. If you'd rather just make 8 strands, that's fine too. That's up to you, and figure out some other way you want to hang the stick. But that should be what we have here for materials. And essentially what you'll do is figure out which side you want to be your top, and we'll tie beads on that'll be bottoms of clusters, and then you can just rest beads on top of those bottom beads, and those top beads don't have to be tied. So anywhere where you want things to kind of stop, you can tie a bead and then you can layer other ones on top. You can kind of see how I've done that on these close-ups of strands that are on the thing here. Once all of the beads are on the strands, then we can glue the discs on in kind of different patterns and places. You'll want to kind of leave enough room between some of your bead clusters so that you have enough space to glue some of these little discs. It doesn't have to be a lot of space, but you know, if you make a super clustered bead string, then it'll be hard to get the discs in there. So that's just something to think about as you're adding stuff. And you can see here in these examples, you can have the discs glued to the very ends of your strands and make each of the ends of your strands have just end on a disc cluster. Or you could, I'll show something a little later, you could end on a bead and then have these just throughout. And you can see that with the different sizes and shapes of little acrylic guides you've got on there, there's a lot of different ways that you can arrange these to kind of provide some fun and different looks there. The important thing will be that you have enough of something to sandwich the fishing line between. So the glue is going to sandwich 2 of the discs together with the fishing line in between, and that's what's going to hang those discs on the line. So something that if you get kind of to a point where you're like, I don't want to be dealing with beads for a second, then just taking some time to like play with some different possible arrangements without the glue, just sort of setting them up can be a good way to kind of figure out like what kind of little arrangements you want for your discs. And then finally, there will be, once the discs are dry, which will have to be a tomorrow thing for everybody, sorry, then you would attach your strands to your stick. We can tonight, however, get a lot of the loops tied ahead of time in the strand, so that all you have to do is slip them over your stick once the glue is dry, and then kind of arrange your strands how you like on your stick. This picture is one that I built for Laura on request. And so it's got a lot more strands, but it was also a 6-foot stick or something like that. And what I gave everybody is about a 2.5-foot stick, because I figured not everybody has giant windows to hang little things in. So that might be a little bit more manageable. Though, if you don't like the stick that you got, the driftwood stick that you got, you know, feel free to go down to Sandy Beach and scour and find something you like better. There's nothing saying you have to use the one that you got. That was just to provide everybody with at least something that you could use. And then finally, there is a knot that I found that is, one, not only easy to tie in fishing line, but two, actually looks pretty good when you're done with it. So this knot's pretty handy for that. There is this lovely site, animatedknots.com, and the knot is called the Uni Knot. And the cool thing about this animated knots thing is it literally does it step by step, where you can watch it kind of go step by step. And then it also, you can replay it and step through the steps and pause them, so that if you're like, wait, what was that step again? So if I was like, wait, how did that start? You can just click back and look at things. I will put that in the chat box here in a second too. But that website there is that again. And I think if you just look up animated knots, it'll come up. But that's pretty handy. That animated knot site is pretty great for a lot of different knots, but this one is the one that I found that worked the best. All right. Does anybody need to see any of those slides again at this point? Otherwise, I'm gonna go to camera mode so you can see me, my hands doing crazy things. All right. So we'll stop that. I will put this knot thing in the chat box for anybody to click on and open up if that's useful. And then I will pull up the camera. Here we go. All right, so here's my little workspace. You can see my hands now. One of the things I had said that you could do instead of having a disc on the end is put a bead on the end of your strands. And I can show you how to do that real quick. The other option for the bottom of your strand would be to have a plan for one of your discs to be kind of a final spot for them. So you would glue them at the end. So that's just something to think about. Do you want beads on the end, or do you want discs on the end? And before we get too much farther down there, all right. Here, this is one that I built. That's just kind of a mess right now. So let's see. So you can kind of see, here's one strand where I've ended with discs and then my just little clusters of beads. And you can see that some of these beads are loose between different little tied in things. And then a little farther down, I have some other discs. This is it's not on a stick, it's on a round thing, so it's a little bit gangly here. But so that's one way to look at ending on a disc. And then of course there can also be, oh, let's get this arranged a little better. There we go. You can also have disc clusters throughout your strand as well. So again, just making sure that you leave enough space. And then they'll kind of be able to hang down in a cool little thing. So for those of you who do want to do a bead on the end, like so, there should be, I think there's about 6 of these larger beads, like the really big beads in each kit, or there should be. So that would allow you to do 6 strands with a bead on the end, or, you know, mix it up if you wanted. And I'm gonna get a new strand. Here we go. So to do what I did here for this guy, I started with a little seed bead, and I'm going to do a blue one because that's kind of fun. And the nice thing about the fishing line is, like, you don't need a needle, you just stick the bead on there. You'll get very dexterous doing this project with these little beads. And that's part of the reason why I gave you guys the little container to kind of keep the things in, to help keep them, be able to pick at them and have them not roll everywhere. If you need something a little bigger to kind of like spread out those little beads, you could grab like a dish or a plate or something and kind of, you know, put them in there to be able to scoot them around a little bit more, not have to reach into a small container. But back to this. So that knot that we were looking at before, you'd want to start with kind of a fold back with the bead, and then fold back again, which is kind of trying to show this on a screen with Woodgie fishing line. And then that end, stay. There we go. Loops. So if you can like almost make like a loop, then that can loop around, and then you just sort of like twist that end around and around. And one more for good measure. There we go. Kind of. And then just pull that tight. And you can kind of, let's see, it's trying to make this so it's focused so you can see what's going on here. And as you pull the end piece and then that loop, it kind of starts to, let's see, squish together. And then eventually you can pull from that side, and then it starts to kind of coil up a little bit. There we go. And then basically it slides down like a slip knot. And then we've got this little coil with the bead on the end there. And there's that little bit of excess there. But if you take your big bead, I can find the end in all of the coils, take your big bead and put that on there. Then, whoops, I got a knot in here that I didn't mean to have. Let's undo that knot. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right, so you can just slip this big bead right over the top of that doubling of thread, and then clip that excess end. And now you've got a bead on the end in kind of a nice, neat little way. And like I said, for those of you who want to just do discs on the end, you don't have to mess with this. You can just leave enough room on the end that you can glue it between your discs. So moving on, the bead clusters, I think really it's up to you how you want them to go. Let's see, I'm going to make this one have a little cascade effect. You've got all these different sizes, so you can kind of really play with what your little stacks of beads look like in your little bead clusters. Whoops. The fishing line is like wily. So there's one that I just put like the big bead and then a medium and another one on top of that, just for kind of a fun little thing there. And then if I want my next cluster to kind of be right here-ish, then, and maybe I want that to be a slightly, not a tiny seed bead, but a regular bead. And this is the part that's not super elegant, but you know, it works and it's kind of fun, I think. So once you figure out like, okay, I want my next bead to be there, my next bead cluster to start there, then I literally just tie that bead on. So kind of figure out, oh, here we go, get this on screen. So once I figure out kind of where I want it, then you just sort of really pull it to get that bead on there nice. The fishing line might loosen up a little bit, and that's okay. You know, one of the things that tying it like this will do is give it a little bit of depth so that not all of the beads are on one side or the other. They kind of will be to one side or the other a little bit, which will kind of add some interest.
Kathleen?
Yeah?
Before we're expected to start, are you going to be able to go over that first knot again to tie on that end bead?
Yes.
Because that was real confusing. At least for me, like I was trying to follow along and then did something real bad to my fishing line.
Not a problem. I can go over that again right now. So let's take a pause from this. I'm going to set that to the side. And what I'll do to help is I'm going to, this is a little bit silly, but I'm going to put the animated knots here as well. So you can kind of see it happening again. And if there's a spot that is like the hard part for you, let's go back to that step. And then I'll show you in real life with the twine. So probably the hardest thing is this first part would be my guess right there. So if you start with thinking of it, trying to get something like that, right? So whatever bead you're gonna use for your end bead, if you're doing the end bead idea, so you wanna get that guy on there, right? Whoops. Don't let it escape too far. Once you give yourself enough room in your line, so there's the bead, you can kind of pull it a little bit to kink that so that it won't fuss on you quite as much. And feel free to follow along as we go here if you want to do end beads. So we've got our little end there, and now we're gonna make kind of an S shape, if that helps that a little bit. So there's my bead, and there's my top line. This is the rest of the line, and of course it's twisting because it's fishing line. And we've basically made like an S. So then we're going to take the bottom of our S and we're going to loop it up and around like that. So the bead is back in there. I'm trying to show this, but I have to hold on to it. So that's probably what's making this hard. Let's see. Get that back up there again. And that's where we're going right now. So it's not going to look as pretty as that blue cord because this is fishing line and it has a little bit of a mind of its own. But if I just were to show where things are in relationship, the bottom of this S that I've curved up is going on top of both of these threads. And then we're going to loop that around. So it was on top, and now we're looping it around and through the top and the middle part of the S. And then we're just doing that again and again and again. I think there's like four times you want to kind of do it, 3 or 4 times. So then it kind of looks like this. So you've basically taken that top thread and just sort of woven it through that O a bunch of times. And your little tail is kind of right there. It's come out through the rabbit hole, so to speak, and it's peeking out. And then if you kind of grab that tail end and pull, it's going to, and then pull on the loop side, it's going to slowly kind of start to squish that. Once you get it kind of squished to about there, then you'll probably be able to squish it a little bit more with your fingers. And then once you've got it kind of a little bit more squished, if that makes sense, then you can slide it down, because it's like a slip knot, to your bead. And then you'll see it's still a little bit loopy and messy there, but if you push on it, it's going to squish down even further into a nice little tight kind of spiral. Let's see, get this to focus. See if I can get it up close and change the focus. Let's see. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. You can see all of the little wrinkles in my hand and the loopy of that knot. So did that make sense? And I do highly recommend pulling up that animated knot thing. If you're not on your phone while you're zooming, you can pull it up on your phone maybe. If you have one that can do that, I find that really helpful. And if anybody at any time needs me to just pull up that animated knot kind of website again for them, I can do that as well. And just say, show that other step again. And this is probably the hardest part right there, to try and tie it onto a bead. When we're tying it onto the sticks, you get those big nice loops and you can just leave them until you stick them on your stick and then tighten them down. So, and you're not trying to do it onto a bead. So, yeah. Since I've got this guy on here, I'll stick him on. Found another big bead. How are folks doing? Oh, cool. Nice. And you can make your clusters as long or as short or as whatever as you like. You know, if you like 3s, awesome. If you like 6s, go for it.
About how many clusters per strand do you think?
Well, I think that's really up to you. The thing is how many disc things do you want on there too? And remember, you're going to want to leave probably about 4 inches of string at the end. That's going to be your top end, so that you give yourself enough room to tie that knot to your stick. So make sure that you don't bead yourself out of room. So then these are all about, I think, 3 feet long or 4 feet long. So with that, I think it's kind of a little bit up to your sort of aesthetics in terms of like how much room do you want between things, and how many clusters do you want. On the mobile that I showed you, I had 2 per strand. I only had 2 little disc clusters. So maybe there would be 1. All right, let's see. We're gonna tape this sucker down. This is why I said the tape might be helpful, because the fishing line likes to be woodgy. It has a memory. So if I decide that, about every couple of inches here, I'm going to have a bead cluster, and then I want to have only 2 disc clusters, then maybe I can put a bunch of bead clusters in. But if I want to put like 3 disc clusters per strand, then you want to make sure that you leave enough space for that. These discs can kind of fit in pretty well between a lot of different things. So it's kind of up to you what you like. I would say probably you'd want to put at least 2 disc clusters per strand, because that'll just kind of give it that nice flow, which you can kind of see. Let's see. Oh, there. Let's see. Oops. I'm gonna share that other screen for a second. There we go, which you can kind of see there. So those strands there on that have 2 little disc clusters per strand, and the beads are pretty far apart. Some of them are closer and some of them are farther. But there's nothing saying that you have to do yours like this. If you're like, no, I want the beads every inch. Great. As long as you have the beads to do it, have fun with that. Just make sure that if you are doing it every inch, you leave yourself maybe some 2 or 3 inch spaces for your discs if you want those on there. So
and I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're adding the additional beads after you get the end done, are you tying a knot before you add more beads, or how are you securing them where they're going to sit on the line?
Gravity will secure them where they sit on the line. So see these 2 guys here that I put, because this is a mobile, so the strands will be hanging down, right?
Right.
Gravity is going to keep those 2 extra beads that I added there on there. So then my next cluster, let's say.
But did you tie a knot to keep the beads in that spot?
Yes. So this bead right here, I tied a knot on the bottom bead. And then if I want my next cluster, let's say I'm going to put a little blue bead in there. I want my next cluster, say, to be right here.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would tie my next bead there, but those 2 that are in between don't have to be tied.
Right. I get that part.
So this guy, if I want it to be right here, doing kind of a every 3 inches sort of thing, tie it on, and then I can stack whatever beads I want. Oops.
Oh, I see. You're running the line back through the bead.
I'm literally just kind of tying it on, so there's just a little knot there on this.
Okay, got you.
And then I'm adding my other beads on top of that, and those beads don't have to be knotted. They're just going to rest in between the knotted beads, basically. So this guy will just sit here, and gravity will keep it with its cluster mate. Maybe I want 4 beads on top of that. There's a little tiny one. And there's beads everywhere. It's that tink, tink, tink sound when you know you've lost something. So here I've got 3 on top of it, and I'm going to add a big guy on top of that, just for fun. Not a big guy, but a bigger guy. So then I might say, okay, that I'm done with that little cluster now, and now I'm going to make another cluster right here, leaving space for a disc. So then I would tie on my next bead that's going to be kind of the thing that secures the next stack. So I say I'm leaving a little space because I'm going to put a disc between those. Here's my little loose stack of beads. The gravity will take care of them. And then I'm going to tie this back guy on. Which some of these bigger beads, when you tie them on, the fishing line doesn't always like to tie on to these bigger round beads, so it might not stay nice and close like some of the others, but you just got to kind of pull on it some to sort of get it nice like that. The line is 30-pound test, so unless you're really yanking hard, you're probably not going to break the line. So and it's kind of just I don't know, I find it sort of meditative to just string these little beads on these lines. Kind of fun. And I think the one thing you have to be careful of is before you tie a bead on top of your loose stack to kind of secure in between the two, there is always the danger that your beads can slip off. So just always kind of be careful there. So there's another little stack. Add. Let's see. And there's nothing saying that you can't also like just have a single bead somewhere and it's just tied by itself, little lonely bead doing its thing. I might decide that I want this bead by this really large stack to just kind of be an inch away or something. What we've got. going on here. And I'll be figuring out some sort of fun disc thing for in between these guys. At some point. But let's see. So I'm probably on this strand about halfway there, little over halfway. I've got this little amount left. So again, just a reminder to make sure that you save at least about 4 inches or so, just to make your life a little easier at the end when you're making your loop. Something like that. That might actually be a little more than 4 inches. That might be 8 inches. Also depending on how thick your stick is too. If your driftwood stick's really fat, you might need to save yourself a little extra. If it's really thin, you might not need as much. All right.
So Kathleen,
Yeah.
so when you tie the knot, can you show me that on the bead?
The bead knot or
Yeah.
the end knot?
The bead knot.
Okay, it's literally just an overhand thing. So I've got my bead here,
Yeah.
my little bead, and I am literally taking my loose end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Putting it over the string and then back under. And then tying that down.
Okay. So I'm doing that, but it comes loose. Is there a trick to that, or is it I'm not pulling it tight enough?
You want to just pull it kind of good and tight to kind of get it to sort of clamp down a little bit. It may come a little loose, and that's okay.
Okay.
Especially on these bigger beads. You'll see this one. Those bigger beads, the line has a harder time kind of really cinching down on.
Okay. Then I'm doing it right. I just wasn't sure if it needed to be, because it's not as tight and I was working on a bigger bead.
Oh yeah, these bigger guys will just, they're a little harder to kind of get it to cinch down completely on.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Once it's hanging, that doesn't seem to be too big of an issue. And if they do loosen up a little bit, you can always just sort of like pull on them again. The downside to the fishing line, the upside is that it's not going to like break, probably, you know, unless somebody grabs it and tries to put their entire weight on it or something, but there we go. Dun, dun, dun. And if you really don't like the way that the loops on the bigger beads work, you can always use one of the smaller seed beads for your bottom beads, because those do tend to tie a little bit better, a little easier to get the knots to kind of work. And like I said, it's okay to just really kind of pull on that line to get it to kind of get some memory of that knot in there. One of these little guys. Little did you guys know that you were signing up to learn how to be very dexterous with your fingers tonight. So I'm getting pretty close on this strand here to where I'm probably going to want to start leaving myself a little bit of room. I think I have room for maybe one more little cluster, and then I'll want to save space for tying to my stick. So let's see. Start with one of these little round guys.
Watch Alaska's news source for coverage of Southeast. I'm at the Haynes Emergency Operations Center. Sean McGuire takes you to the scene. With community-driven stories and details on current events happening inside the Capitol.
Did you say about 4 inches at the top?
Yeah, 4 to 6, or well, how thick is your stick?
About this thick.
Okay, so that one's not too bad. So yeah, I think, and if you find yourself being somebody who needs just a little bit more space for knotting, like if more line would make you more comfortable, then give yourself that extra line. You'll want at least 4 inches, but 6 might actually be more comfortable, actually. Now that I'm looking at it.
This is an epidemic.
So I will do a quick another demo for tying that same knot not on a bead but on a stick. So I'm leaving myself actually quite a bit of room here between my last bead and the end, because I'm just a little bit just want to make sure that I have that space. So if I've got my stick here, and you don't have to tie this on your stick, you can tie it off of your stick, not on your stick. Or if you're like, well, I need to tie it on something that'll make things easier, you could grab a pen or a pencil too to just sort of make your knot on. So I'll show how that kind of works. The pen's a little easier to kind of see. So we'll just demo that one more time when you're ready to kind of loop off your end here. So again, I'm looking like I'll have about that much space between my stick and my top bead if I go here. If I decide that maybe I can actually get a little bit more in there, I could shorten this down, right?
This is you
So trying to show all of the things. Shorten that down to there, and then here's my end. Just trying to play with the camera here. So once again, you have your loop, and we're creating an S. Let's see, trying to make that, and then the S goes, the bottom of the S kind of turns into a B. Actually, we could look at it that way. And then that tail of the B loops down and through its circle part. And you just do that like 3 or 4 times until you just have this little tiny, let's see, nub of a tail. And then you grab that little nub of a tail and you pull. Once you kind of get it to this place, that's probably good enough until you're ready to mount it on your stick. And then once you are ready, basically, if you've got this nice little loop, it's a slip knot loop. When you're ready to put it on your stick, you can just loop it over. And then pull up on the whole, let's see, I'm wondering if I can do this from below so you can see what I'm doing. Pull up on that, and I'm pulling on the bottom part until it's kind of to the stick, and then scrunch it basically to get that little final bit. Now this is a slip knot, so if you decide, if you put it on there and then you're like, oh, you know what, I really don't like this strand on the section of the stick that I put it on, you can pull it and take it off and readjust it. So and you can get it scrunched down a little bit more if you need to too. But how are folks doing on your strands?
Good.
All right. I think probably at about, let's see, we've been going for about an hour now. At some point, we'll take a break from beading strands, and I'll just demonstrate gluing so that you can see that. Doesn't mean you have to glue right now. Doesn't mean you have to glue even tonight. If you're just like, I just want to bead strands until I'm happy with them and then make my little things. But I just want to make sure I go over that with everybody tonight before it gets too late. So maybe in about a couple of minutes, we'll start looking at the gluing. And I'll prep my space for that here. Actually,